Hello, Americans. This is recorded how the species volume everywhere it is, and where and how we are shared, ulterior from how we are shared by the that which generated us, individuals grouped, locations, areas, ages, sexes, and species body of volume slash S. Now long tactically apart from nature too, with no criminal foreign influences, and especially differentially where those criminal foreign influences have been legalized, and where and how that has not been accounted for and brought in with the variables of the logic and reason with opinions and convictions, and note with passions. See, there are certain sense and sensibilities, for example, regarding calm speech or aggression, where and how sequence shifts collusions are the premises I'm using, that which is actually recorded. So people that work for Trantolo and Trantolo, for example, I don't know them. They're associated with the I know them. I asked them to have. I told them that the news media attached me and others to fake words. They also did it as roles with those child abuses we heard of, reported through time, with the child abuses with the church locations. See, they have other methods recorded through time, as actually recorded the breaching method too, with regarding uses of black, how it is not understood that and how a breaching method did that, how they had witch trials, real or made up. See, we know that the slavery was real, but it was made up too. And we know that, in other words, where and how fact, cheap nature oriented predicate acts exist. And those had been sustained. Identity oriented predicate acts had been sustained. Complete remote possession over people pretending to be able to speak honestly regarding subjects treatments and predicate treatments, increasingly predicate acts to counter them, fact, cheap, nature oriented predicate acts. Now, nature is going to demonstrate them. And the breaching method in the most criminal enterprises and even countries as archetypal criminal enterprises, they don't want to be blamed for where and how they're standing criminal seriousness natures, but they have agreed to be in writing with their fact treatments, but they left out exceptions in exception nature. And they left it out because of where and how, what was sophistication before our founders were born here and before their founders were born there, was a human volume science breaching method that forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded, shocked, took as shock and awe, and making other people shock and awe, and just specifically for the syntax to keep qualities of fact, cheaping nature, A, therefore B. Time treatments used simultaneously, self-value used simultaneously, too fast, too slow, to accord with solutions in the furtherance of that which is overtly in America and in the United States and in other countries, all countries where the human volume is now, since before our founders were born. The designs of infrastructure and a means to it, sickly distinctly too, to keep out sickly non-distinctly. The same way sickly distinctly every single individual, no matter how powerful one could get as a leader. If you're over locations, areas, and states that are criminally foreign influence uses of positive treatments and negative treatments and identity treatments simultaneously in collusion, formally, at interbranch locations, and through criminal foreign influences, which we must refer to as hyper criminal foreign influences, to be able to syntactically counter where and how either wars or sanctions has been counters to to all the negative value nature, progressive tax natures, where and how there's complete possession over two, simultaneously where and how there are exceptions in exception nature regarding economic variables and their treatments. They're left out where and how, slavery was a part of this against everyone, that slavery method. Now, to understand that slavery method, we have to observe how sickly distinctly. And it had employed everyone to other motivations, nature, needs, interests. And everyone still wanted to hide behind those apparent ones their means and needs and wants to be good people. Differentially criminally foreign influence, but increasingly. And they also wanted a need how increasingly to be kept secret. And it is a transition from where and how we have the short words at each age of fact-keeping nature, telling other than that which was left by our founders invisible but still discernible to speak. And where and how that is measured and maintained. Where and how the peak sophistication of the hierarchy of people who will follow orders, like the police, and their protocol, the word they're allowed to say and not. They're not allowed to tell on each other. All exceptions in exception nature have been how they got away with that, where and how that was used remotely, has to do with, is also recorded. So we have to deal with the simultaneous. And this is a method that put a whole bunch of motivations that were real juxtaposed with ones that weren't. And it used both all that too, all formal locations of logic, as voice, of formal locations of voice, uses of people's names, which is simultaneously use of when you make using people's names or uses of positive and negative treatments, using people's names, using the species volume science, native pure. So we're going to have ordered the reception of our histories, relieved from, for example, we have to learn first there were hyper Native Americans, but they weren't using that name. There were hyper species body science, native species body science, humanity, at all locations, using the sciences, using the method that had been revealed to the ancients before the sciences became criminally foreign influenced. They were using a method of discerning what's going to be positive, what's going to cause positive or negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures everywhere at once. And it's a science that demonstrates that there are distinct identities of exceptions and of exception nature. And there's one that you can't fake because it's the possession of all of them. For example, a cell nucleus or a cell body is a cell, but without the cell walls, cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall, with the right identity of relationship to itself, the native pure one, it's positive onto and as itself everywhere it is. As can only cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and demonstration of it. Earth's distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous hyper-positive relationship to the rest of space nature, to our only extent that is debatable, to us, our relativity. When we don't go by its system, our value is forced from here, leads of high D's. Earth's value is forced from here, leads of high D's. And the only reason we have been allowed to get away with this so long is because of how the rest of Earth has no criminal foreign influences, especially legalized ones, especially differentially though. So the breaching method knew that it could easily make wars once they had sustained what could only cause negative value nature progression to accident natures, knowingly, but then profited from it. Not profited. The profit part is, in other words, even that was, as we are all victims, A through Z, of countries A through Z, from methods that have you, like, for example, when they bring up aggression, when they bring up non-aggression, neutrality, they're leaving out its actual course. They're simultaneously in collusion with databases where everyone is forced to speak through others, where and how differentially, but differentially increasingly too. All courts, all police locations, all military locations, all campuses, where and how our countries share families here and there. This, before they were sophistication like that, and while there were already sophistication like that, but before there was sophistication like that again, there had already been sophistication like that per the breaching method that is recorded overtly how it consciously, seen on former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson of Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act, also has roles with what is as actually recorded worse than war crimes on his behalf, originally and still. They only understood to an extent. And they're exploiting where and how people, they just say whatever to people in the background, even where they don't have the right to lie. As a James Comey is also one of the ones communicating and having communicated with a former director of the FBI, recorded roles with New Britain Superior Court people, with predicate acts with his co-defendants in a 2006 district court case, and in the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center right before it was attacked, and in the World Trade Center leading up to the attack and since, and with the investigators of it. So they have complete remote possession of over where here and there the locations, areas in the states, peak voices would make uses of our names: America, Country A, Country Z. Anyway, no, this is exploiting where and how we are really individual, grouped, and species body to discern how we are with hyper invisible and invisible but still discernible juxtaposed. Only the extent of it is debatable. But how such was gotten away with, things that are not debatable, gotten away with, is also the subject of American history, of every other history. In other words, they were making mistakes in courts because they were dishonest. So the nature of the law has nature of the law has an identity, but we can only discern it through the discerning of nature is nature. And in other words, there are three distinct, and the value of that. And those are three different ways. The invisible but still discernible is demonstrating that we are to discern it by how it is distinctly invisible but discernible, those three different ways. For example, temporary / lasting. We are a quality of diffusion. But see, now it is as systems ulterior from the one that is the hypersyntactical conjunction to our fact-cheaping nature, where and how we are fact-cheaping nature, where and how we are quality as fact-cheaping nature, quality/IES. It is distinctly 5 sequence natures, and it is distinctly 3 sequence natures bound, 1 complete identity, not just as the cell, but for example, as the value of that came from, and that is still increasing, that which came from it is, while as the value of the order of the finite, while as itself, but distinctly now. While as it simultaneously as the order of what is active, while simultaneously being as what is the order of what is progressive, and simultaneously being what is the order of identity's complete relationship to itself as a semi-nature, as all semi-nature, as all complete identities of the souls of the parts of your body, as they are semi-nature relationship to your complete identity. So it is more probable and is more practical to theorize or to opine or to convict that the ancients who taught English, they taught it this way because they were being led by where and how. For example, when you bring up slavery, and when you bring it up without bringing up how it was sickly distinctly against everyone, that's measured and maintained, self-valued by the breaching method /s, the breaching method /methods / breaching methods, distinctly from our own, here, there, everywhere. Again, systems ulterior from that which is actually hyperconjunctive to our actual, how we are actually manifest. So it's not just former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. It's not just courts with judges and prosecutors and their family members and people that work for the courts and their family members being and having been involved with offensively since founding, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and that insidiousness of opinions, A through Z, of people that blamed on other things, others, or ourselves. That which is actually being demonstrated. And or they blamed the things correctly, and were wrongly mixed, exactly the way the breaching method wanted and needs. Inclusion with other things against other people, and worse, they painted metaphysically and identity what couldn't be entertained or and defend itself at any locations, area, state of the entire species. So, fact-cheaping nature-wise. See, everything comes down to where we are fact-cheaping nature-oriented. Thank you, Nigel. Thank you. So when we can end the wars, and we have to have told what they're not allowed to say. The police forms the military families. So in other words, we have people that went on to be military police who are involved with predicate acts, identity theft, fraud, slanders as victims. But if you try to call them a victim, they've been victim predators in background, stacking fake things in databases. And this is towards different subjects because they have a use by a mixed abuses of each age of fact-cheaping nature. Because then they have types of experts who respond to that from locations. No, And so they make mistreatments. And so this is also tied to really what's been kept there. If you like the statistics regarding the bad things that happen to people of all locations, like cities, there are more bad things than there are streets that could have been prevented too. But to prevent it requires a quality of fact human nature that is being haven't been prevented offensively. Per where and how the breaching method with sophistication here since before our founding parents who didn't have free speech, and they had the fear if anyone would figure out their roles with it, because countries individually grouped in together were used enslaved even together, and they were forced to deny it because they were the peak employments, the peak quality of fact A, therefore B, the value of exceptions, dictators. Simultaneously, they have to pretend to be against dictators. Everything to force qualities of fact human nature that prevent actual proper quality of premises treatments, proper quality of identity treatments. We long ago had obligations to demonstrate how a whole bunch of countries and physical cultures colluded with uses of black and white to keep black pupils and the white survives from, in other words, and this course of what is invisible but still discernible from being used, that which is really going to cause positive or negative value, evolution's fruits and gifts. Thank you. Bubba Jack, man. I like your name. It sounds Jamaican to me. How come people don't say man anymore? Hey, man. I don't know. See, but now women specifically, distinctly hurt by the breaching method called colonization. And so people would make subject treatments and they would separate how women were hurt. They would separate how, and Native Americans. So we have to learn, we have to have a book of, we have to have a shared American history that's correct. And it begins with where and how George Washington could only counter extort the people entrenched with slavery, North and South, because it was a breaching method that had everything like that, because it had groups individually grouped in together, criminally foreign influence, positive and negative treatments, identity treatments, all locations. Religions were forged to counter this, but all locations, including their own. So they still have roles with abuses of the elderly and the children and uses of the hospitals, criminally foreign influenced. So how we can there's a thing called injunctive reliefs. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a police force, I'm not a criminal, not a judge, not a prosecutor, not a military. So in other words, thank God, there's a difference between making positive out of negative and making hyper positive out of negative. For example, thank God. When someone says thank God, it means they're trying to make a positive out of a negative, usually in some cases. But if they're trying to make a hyper positive out of negative, in other words, thank God, systems that entertain any forms of slavery, nature's nature itself, and the value of that only increasing with that, it's going to demonstrate negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and demonstration of that ulterior from its system, the one that works with ground node. And part of the reason the electrical engineering of English, of our human volume science as actual, has ground relevant, is so we could see so it has ties to where and how we have this manifest value/value progression as syntax nature, as function/s, as actually we are recorded. See, before computers were invented, these words were already in the dictionary. Identity, simultaneous, positive, negative, neutrality, locations, memory, instances, data, databases. The ancient republic for which we stand is a database for my battery. Your battery is low. I'm about to lose my battery. Let's see. Okay, so I'm about to lose my battery. So thank you for listening. And so we have to simultaneously, as countries, be able to admit who's hurting us and are hurting other people, but not relative to the thing. We have to do it relative to the breaching method, syntactically. See, if someone's going to counter predicate acts, they have to counter a group. So we have overt criminal enterprises. Thank God. In other words, thank God nature is going to cause those negative values to demonstrate it. Or, so in other words, not to say, oh, we could profit from it. That would be making positive out of negative. Making hyper positive out of negative also requires, per science, prayer. See, they took over words. They changed what prayer meant. It means. This is one of the things that the value of sequence true is with the reception of the subject /s associated with the Old Testament and with the Quran. See, this is also relevant again to where and how the breaching method, predicate acts delivery system method, criminal insidiousness delivery system method, it had already been entrenched. So the sciences, and it already had abridged the sciences, that which had been revealed. The identity of relationships these sounds have to each other, better than living. In the same way that the languages are grouped, left to right and right to left. Not just English and Arabic, they go together. All languages. Our speed, the same way our species body does. All exceptions, exception nature, are in demonstration of the same thing. See, we could be systems other than its own, but we could be exceptions. We can make exceptions and be other systems. But it's going to demonstrate. That's in demonstration of the same thing. Leaves of Hadith, force, space, nature, transfer. The same system that causes that, we could tap, we could harness it. Ancient gaming system. I'll donate as in charity instead of my own website, if YouTube will help. Me do it the way. In other words, we have to ground it in where it is most overtly / insidiously. Distinctly from, we have to ground at all locations. A common, shared, multi-front, counter /s to where and how the identity grounds, conjunctions to where and how we are qualities of fact, chimney nature. Ulterior, now I say qualities, plural, because now we are no longer the quality. Or in other words, and where and how they debate things. So the countries involved with nuclear weapons, like Russia, like America, and like the countries that were close to it and are close to it, and Ukraine has nuclear for energy. So that could blow up at any time. See, all these systems, a wave from the ocean took out Fukushima. Not just that takes out everything. It takes out because we are all tactile from the system as natures. See, samurai, did they have free speech? No, I don't know why I brought samurai. No, but so things can be natural like war, but only as criminal insidiousness. Where and how there was preemptively, there was already means to discern this. They have complete possession over the sense and sensibilities of people. Per this method that used all identity ground locations like those where involved with where George Washington did, through the people that were involved as are really what founded us, which includes Native Americans. They made a phenomenon. We're delayed. We're the sick, complete uses of complete possession of everyone. They were about to go into, and they were going into the next phase that would have been worse. And that is it, where everyone was done. But for those damage controls done by the Native Americans, sustained against that breaching method that no one discerned, because everyone proper syntactical counters to it knew while it was sustaining that. Well, in other words, it caused all these problems. Specific, before the American history in the range we have had it told to us. It caused negative identity progression and employed nature's responses in demonstration of that. Employed all roles, blaming other things, others, or ourselves for what nature was actually demonstrating. And it took over the method that is hyper Native American, hyper humanity. It is a hyper native humanity tribe that Native Americans were. They were going by the Native American system. It is a hyper native humanity tribe that ancient countries were going by. Those involved what really led up to the revelations that come through. Really what yin yang and alpha and omega are increasingly value as. And four, simultaneously, there are proofs that the ancients revealed them working together. For example, yin and yang, as the human volume we are, it is male and female bound, one body though. Cell body, cell nucleus, cell wall, cell one body where it's positive, also positive onto itself. I forgot now, and I'm about to lose my thing. Thank you guys, and peace in the world. But I mean, we have to replace peace. Peace and war are about the simultaneous. So healing in the world, we have to heal the world, and we have to deal with where and how sense and sensibilities regarding aggression or non-regression. There are collusion with sequence shifts. And with everyone speaking through other people. And so we have to understand that the youngest ages, when I was, I was able to, we'll examine how we could discern the hyper invisible, but still discernible. And its conjunction to ground is one of the ways, the increasing value of it at all locations, areas, and states. We're supposed to be paying increasingly to conjunction. I mean, increasing attention to little finite details of nature. Finite in the word the definite article. Definite, DEFINITE. See, finite is the root. So there's the order of the finite. There was the order of what is active. And there was the order of value that is to come that has not gotten here yet. So what was the value of New York City as it unfolded, as it actually unfolded, per actually what were the motivations and impositions and limits and positive things with what made New York City when even the suburbs were designed since before our founding parents were born. Were designed to cause negative values, progressions, acts, natures, specifically too, simultaneously to make exception nature, to design people propagated syntax style, logic styles, incapable of defending themselves and of affording, voicings of souls what it wants and needs to say, species body, through and as the species body. Why and how these words really were manifested